What if I told you that one country invented human rights before the term existed? That the world's first superpower rose from these sands, only to be brought down by a 20-year-old who cried himself to sleep after burning it to the ground? This is Iran. Not the Iran you see in headlines. This is the story of how a civilization rose, fell, and rose again across 5 millennia. From Cyrus the Great to the Islamic Revolution, and the secret battles happening right now. But here's what nobody tells you. Iran's greatest weapon was never its armies. It was its ability to absorb conquerors and make them Persian. In 5000 BC, yes, you heard that right, someone in what we now call Iran made history's first vintage. Archaeologists found the residue in a jar at Haji Firuz Tepe. While the rest of the world was figuring out farming, Iranians were already toasting to civilization. But the real story begins with a man who would change the concept of power forever. 559 BC. Enter Cyrus the Great. Here's your first plot twist. Cyrus conquered the largest empire the world had ever seen, 45% of the global population, but he didn't rule like a tyrant, he ruled like a diplomat. When he took Babylon in 539 BC, the people welcomed him as a liberator. Why? Because while other kings enslaved, Cyrus freed. He released the Jewish people from captivity, yes, that captivity, and funded their return to Jerusalem. The Cyrus cylinder, now in the British Museum, reads, "I did not allow anyone to terrorize the land. I put an end to their misfortune." Sound familiar? This is the world's first declaration of human rights, written 2,500 years before the UN existed. But here's the question. Can an empire built on tolerance survive the ultimate test? Enter Darius the Great in 522 BC. If Cyrus was the heart, Darius was the brain. He built the Royal Road, 1,500 miles from Susa to Sardis. A message could travel it in 7 days using a relay system of 111 stations. Normal travel, 3 months. He invented the derrick, standardized currency. He built banking houses where the word check originates from Old Persian. He dug a canal from the Nile to the Red Sea, 2,400 years before Suez. But his masterpiece? Persepolis. A palace complex so magnificent that artisans came from every corner of the empire to build it. This wasn't just architecture, it was a statement. We are many cultures, one empire. And then came the boy who would cry over its ashes.
334 BC. Alexander the Great invades. He's 22 years old, brilliant, ruthless. He defeats the Persian army, he loots, he burns Persepolis to the ground in a drunken rage. But here's the twist history forgets. Alexander spent the rest of his short life trying to become Persian. He married a Persian princess, Roxana. He forced 10,000 of his soldiers to marry Persian women in a mass wedding. He adopted Persian court customs, dress, and administration. When he died at 32, his last words weren't about Greece. His empire immediately fractured because he tried to fuse 2 worlds and failed. But here's the secret. Persia didn't die. It waited. 247 BC. The Parthians emerged from northeast Iran, nomadic warriors who perfected the Parthian shot, facing backward on horseback while firing arrows. They defeat the Romans so decisively in 53 BC that the empire never dares a full invasion again. For 500 years, they hold the line between east and west. But they left almost no art, no grand buildings. They were ghosts who guarded the flame. 224 AD. Ardashir I declares, "We are not Parthians. We are the heirs of Cyrus and Darius." The Sasanians revived Zoroastrianism, rebuilt Persian culture, and created Jundi Shapur, a university and hospital complex that was the Harvard of the ancient world. In 260 AD, Shapur I captured the Roman Emperor Valerian and used him as a footstool for the rest of his life. But here's the real flex. When Greek philosophers were being persecuted in Byzantium, they fled to Persia. Khosrow I gave them asylum and funded their work. But a new force was gathering in the desert, one that would change everything.
632 AD. Within a decade, Arab armies sweep out of Arabia. The mighty Sasanian Empire, exhausted from 26 years of war with Byzantium, collapses in 642 AD. The last Sasanian prince flees to China. But here's what nobody expected. The Persians didn't just convert to Islam, they transformed it. Within 100 years, Persian became the language of literature, science, and administration across the Islamic world. The Abbasids moved the capital to Baghdad, right next to the old Sasanian capital, because they needed Persian bureaucrats to run their empire. The conquered became the conquerors of culture. The Golden Age, when the world learned Persian. 820 to 1220 AD. This is the Islamic Golden Age, and it's basically Persian. Razi invented medical alcohol and wrote the first clinical descriptions of smallpox and measles. Khwarizmi created algebra. The word comes from his book title, the algorithm named after him. But the soul of Persia was being written in poetry. Firdausi spent 30 years writing the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, 50,000 couplets. He used almost no Arabic words. It was an act of cultural resistance disguised as literature. Listen to the story of those gone by, for the world is but a passing sigh. Omar Khayyam calculated the calendar so precisely we're still using it. Ibn Sina's medical encyclopedia was used in European universities until the 1600s. But in 1219, the horizon turned to dust. The Mongol apocalypse. 1206, the Mongols destroy everything. They raze cities. They destroy the irrigation systems that had sustained Persia for millennia. The population drops by 90% in some regions. But watch this. Within 2 generations, the Mongols became Persian. They converted to Islam. They patronized Persian art. Rashid al-Din, a Jewish convert who became prime minister, wrote one of history's first universal histories. Out of the ashes, a new dynasty would rise and define Iran forever. 1501. A 14-year-old boy named Ismail marches out of the Caspian forests with an army that worships him as a god. By 15, he's Shah of Iran. His secret weapon? The Kizilbash, warrior mystics who would die for him without question. But here's the move that changes Iran forever. Ismail declares Shia Islam the state religion, not because he was particularly devout, but because he needed to differentiate Iran from the Sunni Ottomans and Uzbeks. For the first time in 900 years, Iran is united under Iranian rule, and Shi'ism becomes the glue. 1587. Abbas I takes the throne at 16. The empire is shrinking. The Ottomans have taken Baghdad. The Uzbeks raid at will. Abbas does the unthinkable. He makes peace on humiliating terms, then spends 10 years building a modern army. Not tribal levies, professional soldiers, artillery, musketeers. Then he strikes. He retakes everything. He expels the Portuguese from Hormuz. He moves the capital to Isfahan and builds paradise. The Naqsh Jahan Square, second largest in the world. The Shah Mosque, the Sheikh Lafala Mosque, the Ali Kapu Palace. He built 162 bridges, caravanserais every 30 kilometers on trade routes. He invited Armenian merchants to stimulate commerce. Under Abbas, Isfahan had 600,000 people, one of the world's largest cities. But empires, like men, grow old. 1722. The Safavids fall to Afghan rebels. Iran fractures. Enter Nader Shah, a military genius who reunites the country through sheer will. He defeats the Ottomans, the Russians, the Indians.
In 1739, he sacks Delhi and takes the Koh-i-Noor and Darya-e-Noor diamonds, two of the largest in the world. One is now in the British Crown Jewels, the other is still in Iran. But Nader goes mad with paranoia. He blinds his own son. He's assassinated by his own guards in 1747. His empire dies with him. The Qajars take over, and immediately the world changes. While Iran stagnates, Europe industrializes. The gap becomes a chasm. In 1813 and 1828, Russia takes the Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. The Treaty of Turkmenchai in 1828 imposes capitulations. Foreigners are exempt from Iranian law. Imagine that, in your own country, foreigners have more rights than you. The Qajars sell concessions to Britain: tobacco, oil, telegraphs. Each sale triggers revolts. The people are awake. They want change. And in 1906, they get it. Sort of. 1906. After massive protests, Mozaffar al-Din Shah grants a constitution. Iran gets its first parliament, the Majlis. It's too late. In 1907, Britain and Russia divide Iran into spheres of influence: north for Russia, south for Britain. Iran is never colonized because it doesn't need to be. It's controlled. World War I devastates the country. Famine kills millions. 1921, Reza Khan, an officer, stages a coup. He wants to make Iran a republic like Turkey. The clergy say no. They fear losing power. So Reza becomes Shah in 1925. He modernizes furiously: railways, universities, banning the veil, alphabet reform. He's brutal, though. He crushes tribal revolts. He suppresses dissent. And in 1941, when Britain and Russia need a supply corridor for World War II, they invade and force him to abdicate. His son, Mohammad Reza, takes the throne at 21. He'll be the last Shah. 1951. Mohammad Mossadegh, a nationalist, becomes prime minister. He nationalizes the oil industry, British oil that had been exploiting Iran since 1908. Britain blockades Iran. The economy crashes. In 1953, the CIA and MI6 orchestrate a coup. Mossadegh is overthrown. The Shah returns to power. This isn't conspiracy theory. It's declassified fact. And it poisons Iranian politics forever. The Shah becomes dependent on American support. He rules with an iron fist. His secret police, Savak, notorious for torture. But the Shah makes a fatal mistake. He underestimates a quiet cleric in exile. 1963. Ayatollah Khomeini speaks out against the Shah. He's arrested, exiled, first to Turkey, then Iraq, then France. But his sermons are smuggled into Iran on cassette tapes. In mosques, bazaars, homes, people listen. He frames the struggle not as political, but as moral, Islamic, revolutionary. 1979, the year everything changed. January 1979, the Shah flees. February 1st, Khomeini returns to Tehran. Millions greet him. April, Islamic Republic declared. November, the U.S. Embassy is seized. 52 Americans held hostage for 444 days. The U.S. imposes sanctions, the first of many. But here's the twist everyone misses. The revolution eats its own. 1981, the MEK, a leftist group that helped overthrow the Shah, bombs the Islamic Republican Party headquarters. The Chief Justice and 70 officials die. 2 months later, the president and prime minister are assassinated. The new regime consolidates power through brutal suppression. September 1980, Saddam Hussein invades, thinking Iran is in chaos. He miscalculates. The war lasts 8 years, 500,000 dead. It becomes World War I in the desert. Trenches, gas attacks, human wave assaults. Teenagers, some as young as 12, clear minefields with their bodies. Keys to paradise hang around their necks. Saddam uses chemical weapons on Iranian soldiers and Iraqi Kurds. The world watches. Iran refuses to stop fighting until every inch is reclaimed. Iran finally accepts a ceasefire. Khomeini calls it drinking the poisoned chalice. The economy is shattered. A generation is lost. But the regime survives, and in surviving, it hardens. 2002. Secret nuclear facilities revealed. The U.S. accuses Iran of seeking weapons. Sanctions tighten. The economy chokes. But in 2015, the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, is signed. Iran limits enrichment. Sanctions are lifted. President Trump withdraws. Sanctions snap back. Maximum pressure. September 2022. Mahsa Amini dies in morality police custody. Her crime? Improper hijab. The explosion is immediate. Woman, life, freedom becomes a global chant. Schoolgirls remove headscarves. Men join the protests. The regime responds with bullets. But this time is different. The protests continue for months. The genie is out of the bottle. A generation has tasted defiance. So where does this leave us? Iran is the only country to have had three distinct revolutions that shaped world history: the Achaemenid creation of empire, the Safavid-Wahhabite transformation, and the 1979 Islamic Revolution. It's the land that invented human rights, algebra, and the windmill, that gave the world Rumi, Hafez, and Ferdowsi, that survived Alexander, the Mongols, and Timur. Today, 50% of the population is under 30. They're educated, connected, and restless. The people have the numbers, and history suggests Persia always finds a way. So here's the question I'll leave you with. In a country that survived 5,000 years of invasions, revolutions, and transformations, what makes anyone think this chapter is the final one? The story isn't over. It's never over. This is Iran. Subscribe for more histories they didn't teach you in school.